By occasionally beginning sentences with phrases, you will add variety and sophistication to your writing. A phrase is a group of words that has a meaning. A phrase is missing a subject or verb or both. Therefore, a phrase is not a clause. This video will focus on prepositional phrases, infinitive phrases, participial phrases, absolute phrases, and a combination of these. Prepositional phrase. A group of words that begins with a preposition and ends with an object or objects of the preposition. Objects of prepositions are nouns or pronouns. Examples of prepositional phrases: on the table, over the high peaks, with great determination, from Minneapolis. Prepositional phrases do not contain verbs. This is important to note since the prepositions after, before, since, and until are also subordinated conjunctions, which are used to create dependent clauses. After dinner, before the game, since the beginning, until the morning are prepositional phrases. Here, since is a preposition and beginning is the object of the preposition. After Ahmed ate, before she played, since Maria began, until the sun came up are dependent clauses. Here, since is a subordinating conjunction, Maria is the subject, and began is the verb. Once again, a phrase is missing a subject or a verb or both. The words below make up a clause because there is both a subject and a verb. Prepositional phrases function adjectively as adjectives, or adverbially as adverbs in a sentence. When functioning adverbially, prepositional phrases describe verbs. She hiked over the mountain. Over the mountain is an adverbial prepositional phrase that describes hiked. Shang studied for 3 hours. For 3 hours is an adverbial prepositional phrase that describes studied. When using prepositional phrases that function adverbially, writers have many choices for where to place the prepositional phrase. As already seen, an adverbial prepositional phrase can come directly after the verb it describes. The giant man sang in a surprisingly gentle voice. An adverbial prepositional phrase that is followed by a comma can also come at the beginning of a sentence. In a surprisingly gentle voice, the giant man sang. Notice the comma. An adverbial prepositional phrase that has a comma before and after it can also come after the subject. The giant man in a surprisingly gentle voice, saying. Notice the commas. When functioning adjectively, prepositional phrases describe nouns. A man from Denver won the race. From Denver is an adjectival prepositional phrase that describes man. Quincy found a cat with no tail. With no tail is an adjectival prepositional phrase that describes cat. When using a prepositional phrase that functions adjectively, writers do not have choices for where to place the prepositional phrase. An adjectival prepositional phrase should only come after the noun it describes. My friend from France speaks perfect English. My friend speaks perfect English from France. These sentences have different meanings. If the friend is from France, the prepositional phrase must come directly after the noun friend. The driver without a tail light apologized to the police officer. The driver apologized to the police officer without a tail light. These sentences have different meanings. If the driver does not have a tail light, the prepositional phrase must come directly after the noun driver. Otherwise, the sentence could mean that the police officer did not have a tail light, or the driver spoke without a tail light. This type of error is called a misplaced modifier, since any describing word or phrase, adjectival or adverbial, is a modifier, and something in the wrong place is also misplaced. Misplaced modifiers are also common when a sentence has a direct object. The principal expelled the student without any hesitation. Unless the student had no hesitation, the prepositional phrase is a misplaced modifier. If the principal had no hesitation, the prepositional phrase should come at the beginning of the sentence. Without any hesitation, the principal expelled the student. Or, the prepositional phrase should come before the verb. The principal, without any hesitation, expelled the student. Infinitive phrase, a group of words that begins with an infinitive, to plus a verb, and includes any objects, modifiers, or complements. To dance the tango. To do well in school. To run fast. To go where no man has gone before. To be a student while raising a family. To save enough money for an easy retirement. An infinitive phrase can be the predicate nominative in a sentence. Kim's hope is to save enough money for an easy retirement. Here, the infinitive phrase renames Kim's hope. Eduardo's plan is to be a student while raising a family. Here, the infinitive phrase renames Eduardo's plan. An infinitive phrase can be the subject of a sentence. To save enough money for an easy retirement requires careful planning. Here, the infinitive phrase performs an action. It requires. To be a student while raising a family is difficult. Here, the infinitive phrase is described by the predicate. An infinitive phrase can be the direct object of a sentence. Kim wants to save enough money for an easy retirement. Here, the infinitive phrase is what Kim wants. Eduardo plans to be a student while raising a family. Here, the infinitive phrase is what Eduardo plans. An infinitive phrase can function as an adjective in a sentence. Kim's plan to save enough money for an easy retirement requires her to spend her money wisely. Here, the infinitive phrase describes the subject plan. Eduardo's decision to be a student while raising a family means that he will have little free time. Here, the infinitive phrase describes the subject decision. An infinitive phrase can function as an adverb in a sentence to explain why something is or has been done. Kim set aside a portion of every paycheck to save enough money for an easy retirement. Here, the infinitive phrase explains why Kim set a portion of every paycheck aside. Eduardo gave up all his free time to be a student while raising a family. Here, the infinitive phrase explains why Eduardo gave up all of his free time. As just shown, an infinitive phrase that functions as an adverb can come at the end of a clause. Jordan started eating healthily and exercising regularly to lose weight. An infinitive phrase that functions as an adverb can also come before the clause if preceded by a comma. To lose weight, Jordan started eating healthily and exercising regularly. An infinitive phrase that functions as an adverb can also come after the subject if set off by a pair of commas. Jordan, to lose weight, started eating healthily and exercising regularly. In the previous sentences about Jordan, to lose weight explains why Jordan started eating healthily and exercising regularly. Compare the following sentences. Jordan, to lose weight, started eating healthily and exercising regularly. Jordan's decision to lose weight required eating healthily and exercising regularly. The infinitive phrase, which functions as an adjective in the sentence below, cannot be moved. Jordan decided to lose weight. The infinitive phrase, which functions as the direct object in the sentence below, cannot be moved. To lose weight requires healthy eating and regular exercise. The infinitive phrase, which functions as the subject in the sentence below, cannot be moved. Jordan's goal for the year is to lose weight. The infinitive phrase, which functions as the predicate nominative in the sentence below, cannot be moved. As seen in the previous examples, Only infinitive phrases that function as adverbs can be moved around. Present participial phrases, a group of words that functions adjectively and includes a present participle and any complements and/or modifiers. Running wildly. Studying all night. Practicing the piano. Playing basketball. Cooking dinner. Present participial phrases can include prepositional phrases. Running to the bus stop. Studying through the night. Playing for the basketball team. As mentioned in the definition, present participial phrases function adjectively. The child crying in the corner misses his parents. Crying in the corner describes the child. The woman playing piano is Ryan's wife. Playing piano describes woman. Jermaine laughed at the clown wearing a green wig. Wearing a green wig describes clown. As these examples highlight, a present participial phrase can come after the noun it describes. Notice that there is no comma needed when present participial phrases are used this way. There are two reasons no commas are needed in these sentences. The phrases come right after the nouns they describe. The phrases are essential to the overall meaning of the sentences. This is a complicated rule that is difficult to master, since it is often unclear whether or not information is essential to a sentence. Phrases and clauses that can be removed without changing the essential meaning of the sentence are typically set off with commas. Here are some examples of sentences with non-essential present participial phrases. Micah, wearing a well-tailored tuxedo, strolled into the party. The phrase, wearing a well-tailored tuxedo, is not essential to the overall meaning of the sentence. In fact, whenever a phrase of any type modifies a proper noun, the phrase is considered non-essential. The Brooklyn Bridge, spanning the East River, connects Manhattan to Brooklyn. The 1960 Dallas Cowboys, winning no games, was one of the worst teams of all time. Non-essential present participial phrases can also come at the beginning of the sentence. Spanning the East River, the Brooklyn Bridge connects Manhattan to Brooklyn. Winning no games, the 1960 Dallas Cowboys was one of the worst teams of all time. A present participial phrase that begins a sentence will always modify the subject of the independent clause that follows. It is important to make sure that the present participial phrase does in fact modify the subject it is supposed to. Compare the following sentences. Spanning the East River, the Brooklyn Bridge connects Manhattan to Brooklyn. Spanning the East River, Manhattan is connected to Brooklyn by the Brooklyn Bridge. According to the second sentence, spanning the East River describes Manhattan. Winning no games, the 1960 Dallas Cowboys was one of the worst teams of all time. Winning no games, the team's losses made the 1960 Dallas Cowboys one of the worst teams of all time. According to the second sentence, winning no games describes losses. In these sentences, the present participial phrases are misplaced. In other words, the phrases do not modify what they are supposed to. Here is another type of problem writers and speakers need to avoid when beginning a sentence with a present participial phrase. Having had no time to study, the test was a disaster. Swimming in the lake, her leg got a cramp. The present participial phrases in these sentences describe nothing in the independent clauses that follow. This type of problem is called a dangling modifier. When beginning a sentence with a present participial phrase, writers and speakers can avoid dangling and misplaced modifiers by making sure that the subject of the following independent clause is what is doing the action in the phrase. Having had no time to study, I failed the test. Swimming in the lake, she got a leg cramp. Here are some more examples of present participial phrases used incorrectly. Running through the woods, a stump tripped me. Playing video games all night, Joe's homework did not get finished. Eating too much greasy food, my stomach hurt. Throwing a ball in the house, a lamp got broken. Now, watch how these errors are fixed. Running through the woods, I tripped on a stump. Playing video games all night, Joe did not finish his homework. Eating too much greasy food, I got a stomachache. Throwing a ball in the house, she broke a lamp. There are other ways to fix these errors too. For example, a writer can turn these incorrect sentences into compound or complex sentences. I was running through the woods and a stump tripped me is a compound sentence. When I was running through the woods, a stump tripped me is a complex sentence. Joe was playing video games all night, so his homework did not get finished is a compound sentence. Because Joe was playing video games all night, his homework did not get finished is a complex sentence. The present participle being can be followed by an adjective phrase, being smart and funny, being unable to hide his disappointment, being hungry for a hearty meal, like other present participial phrases, being phrases can go in a variety of places. Michelle, being hungry for a hearty meal, stopped at a truck stop to eat. Being hungry for a hearty meal, Michelle stopped at a truck stop to eat. However, the present participle being can be left out of the sentence and the sentence will mean the same thing. Hungry for a hearty meal, Michelle stopped at a truck stop to eat. It's important to note that gerund phrases look the same as present participial phrases, but they function differently. While present participial phrases function as adjectives, gerund phrases function as nouns. Gerund phrases act as subjects. Speeding through a neighborhood is dangerous. Gerund phrases act as direct objects. Jasmine enjoys cooking for her friends. Gerund phrases act as objects of prepositional phrases. Anne was suspended for swearing at her teacher. So that writers do not misuse commas in their writing, it is important for writers to understand that gerund phrases function in the same way that other nouns function. Speeding through a neighborhood is dangerous does not need a comma. Jasmine enjoys cooking for her friends does not need a comma. Anne was suspended for swearing at her teacher does not need a comma. Past participial phrase. A group of words that functions adjectively and includes a past participle in any complements and/or modifiers. For regular verbs, past participles are the same as past tense verbs. Walked, walked. Carried, carried. Borrowed, borrowed. However, for irregular verbs, past participles are often different than past tense verbs. Forgot, forgotten. Threw, thrown. Swam, swum. Here are some examples. Confused by the assignment. Destroyed by the storm. Borrowed from my friend. Dropped on the floor. Shown to the door. Thrown overboard. As mentioned in the definition, past participial phrases function adjectively. The house destroyed by the storm will get repaired. Destroyed by the storm describes house. The food dropped on the floor attracted ants. Dropped on the floor describes food. She threw a rope to the sailor thrown overboard. Thrown overboard describes sailor. As these examples highlight, a past participial phrase can come after the noun it describes. Notice that there is no comma needed when past participial phrases are used this way. There are two reasons no commas are needed in these sentences. The phrases come right after the nouns they describe. The phrases are essential to the overall meaning of the sentences. Remember, phrases and clauses that can be removed without changing the essential meaning of the sentence are typically set off with commas. Once again, this is a complicated rule that is difficult to master since it is often unclear whether or not information is essential to a sentence. Keisha, given an academic scholarship, did not have to borrow much money. The phrase given an academic scholarship is not essential to the overall meaning of the sentence. As explained earlier, whenever a phrase of any type modifies a proper noun, the phrase is considered non-essential. Here are some more examples of sentences with non-essential present participial phrases. New Orleans, devastated by Hurricane Katrina, may never fully recover. Stephen, kicked off the team for poor grades, can play again next year if his grades improve. Non-essential past participial phrases can also come at the beginning of the sentence. Given an academic scholarship, Keisha did not have to borrow much money. Given an academic scholarship describes Keisha. Devastated by Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans may never fully recover. Devastated by Hurricane Katrina describes New Orleans. A past participial phrase that begins a sentence will always modify the subject of the independent clause that follows. It is important to make sure that the past participial phrase does in fact modify the subject it is supposed to. Compare the following sentences. Given an academic scholarship, Keisha did not have to borrow much money. Given an academic scholarship, paying for college will be no problem for Keisha. According to the second sentence, given an academic scholarship describes paying for college. Devastated by Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans may never fully recover. Devastated by Hurricane Katrina, full recovery will be difficult for New Orleans. According to the second sentence, devastated by Hurricane Katrina describes recovery. In these sentences, the past participial phrases are misplaced. In other words, the phrases do not modify what they are supposed to. Writers and speakers also need to avoid dangling modifiers when beginning sentences with past participial phrases. Confused by the assignment, it never got done. Considered the best cafe in town, we enjoyed our lunch. The past participial phrases in these sentences describe nothing in the independent clauses that follow. Dangling modifiers cause confusion for readers and listeners. When beginning a sentence with past participial phrases, writers and speakers can avoid dangling and misplaced modifiers by making sure that the subject of the following independent clause is what is meant to be described by the phrase. Confused by the assignment, I didn't complete it. Considered the best cafe in town, Cafe Latte is our favorite place for lunch. Here are some more examples of past participial phrases used incorrectly. Written in an unknown language, nobody could understand the text. Stung by a bee, a red welt formed on her arm. Cooked with fresh produce, we enjoyed the sauce. Told many times, Vang still laughed at the joke. Now, watch how these errors are fixed. Written in an unknown language, the text could not be understood. Stung by a bee, she received a red welt on her arm. Cooked with fresh produce, the sauce was delicious. Told many times, the joke still made Vang laugh. There are other ways to fix these errors too. For example, a writer can turn these incorrect sentences into compound or complex sentences. Because the text was written in an unknown language, nobody could understand it is a complex sentence. The text was written in an unknown language, so nobody could understand it is a compound sentence. The joke was told many times, but Vang still laughed at it is a compound sentence. Even though the joke was told many times, Vang still laughed at it is a complex sentence. Absolute phrase. A group of words that modifies an entire clause and consists of a noun and any complements or modifiers. Nouns can be complemented or modified by a present participle, present participial phrase, past participle, past participial phrase, prepositional phrase, or adjective. Her hammer swinging has a noun described by a present participle. Her fingers flying across the keys has a noun described by a present participial phrase. His teeth clenched has a noun described by a past participle. His arms crossed in front of him has a noun described by a past participial phrase. Her hair in a ponytail has a noun described by a prepositional phrase. Their face is dirty has a noun described by an adjective. Remember that this adjective is actually part of a present participial phrase with the word being left out. Being dirty is a present participial phrase. As mentioned in the definition, an absolute phrase modifies an entire clause. A comma or a pair of commas will set the absolute phrase off from the rest of the clause. An absolute phrase can come before the clause. Her voice rising, the teacher demanded the students to settle down. An absolute phrase can come after the clause. The teacher demanded the students to settle down, her voice rising. Or, an absolute phrase can come in the middle of the clause. The teacher demanded the students, her voice rising, to settle down. Here are some more examples. Her fingers flying across the keys, Latoya amazed the audience. Latoya amazed the audience, her fingers flying across the keys. Latoya, her fingers flying across the keys, amazed the audience. Her students confused, the professor tried to explain quantum physics. The professor, her students confused, tried to explain quantum physics. The professor tried to explain quantum physics, her students confused. His house consumed by fire, Tom searched the ruins for anything salvageable. Tom, his house consumed by fire, searched the ruins for anything salvageable. Tom searched the ruins for anything salvageable, his house consumed by fire. Her arm in a sling, Mua watched from the sidelines as her team played. Mua, her arm in a sling, watched from the sidelines as her team played. Mua watched from the sidelines, her arm in a sling, as her team played. Its walls solid, the building has stood for over 300 years. The building, its walls solid, has stood for over 300 years. The building has stood for over 300 years, its walls solid. An absolute phrase serves one of three purposes: to add a focusing detail, to explain a condition, to explain a cause. She sat waiting, her fingers tapping nervously on the table in front of her. A ticket in his hand, the officer strolled back to Jason's car. Stefania, her teeth clenched, tried to restrain herself from saying what was on her mind. The dog stared at the steak, its mouth wet with saliva. Absolute phrases that focus on detail are more common in fiction and narrative writing than in expository writing. In other words, sentences such as these examples are unlikely to be found in formal essays, research papers, or business letters. To explain a condition. The night being clear and mild, we went to the hill to look at stars. Or, the night clear and mild, we went to the hill to look at stars. The season having been a success, my brother's team celebrated with a party. Or, the season a success, my brother's team celebrated with a party. Kishan, his wallet being empty, decided to stay home. Or, Kishan, his wallet empty, decided to stay home. Notice that absolute phrases that explain a condition use a participle form of the be verb, being or having been. Remember that in phrases, participles of the be verb can be left out but still understood. Kishan, his wallet empty, decided to stay home. To explain a cause. Lola, her children having grown to adults, decided to sell her house and move into an apartment. The housing market having suffered during the recession, many homeowners owe more than their houses are worth. The Cardona family, their city having built a community center, started spending every Saturday at the pool. These absolute phrases explain both why and when. The sentences can be turned into complex sentences with the subordinating conjunction because or when. Because their city built a community center, the Cardona family started spending every Saturday at the pool. When their city built a community center, the Cardona family started spending every Saturday at the pool.